At this place in history, we're in Queen City Park in South Burlington with Executive Director of the Vermont Historical Society, Steve Perkins. Where does our story begin?
So we're going to start back around the time of the Civil War when the Central Vermont Railroad was really expanding up and down Lake Champlain. And where we're standing right now was all owned by the railroad. And it was vacant. There really wasn't much here. But the railroad said, what a perfect place for a hotel or a resort. So they built a hotel somewhat where we're standing here and offered train service from the south and the north to have your lakeside vacation in their own hotel owned by the railroad. And so it started to be a little tiny resort community way back right after the American Civil War.
It's a beautiful spot too, kind of secluded still even today.
It still is. You know, if you come across a one-way bridge and then it opens up and you've got this beautiful village. They used to call them cottages all along here, and the people who stayed on this site were called cottagers because they would pay a yearly fee for the ground rent for where their cottage was located. The railroad didn't own it for too long. Eventually they decided they didn't really want to, do the upkeep, and so they found a great partner and they sold the land and the idea of having this association to the Vermont Spiritualists Association.
What is that?
So these are folks who said, if you come together in nature and celebrate God in nature, it's going to make you a better person, and it's going to make your community better, and it'll make a better future. As many people in the late 19th century were part of spiritualist associations around the country. And so Vermont had one, and then a subset of it became the Queen City Park Association. They rented land, they either popped a tent here or they built a little cottage, and they came here year after year after year, and they had a big auditorium, and they would have speakers come in, they would swim in the lake, they built a boathouse, they actually built a huge dock out where steamboats could stop, people could get off on steamboats.
Wow. And
really turned into a very thriving summer community.
So I don't see any of that here right now. The auditorium, the hotel.
No, in 1939 it all burned.
Oh.
And if you can imagine, this is a tiny little neighborhood kind of perched on the side of Lake Champlain. Not a good way to get in and out with fire trucks. And so yeah, it burned. There's very few buildings left from that initial summertime community. It didn't mean that it still wasn't an attractive area. People from Burlington flocked to here to recreate for the summer, and the city set up a trolley station here, and it ran like 20 times a day back and forth from the city of Burlington so that people could swim in the lake. Now, Red Rocks, which is right next to us, was not a park, it was a private estate, but the folks that owned that estate allowed people to use the trails and walk on the cliffs. So they would ride the trolley to Queen City Park and then walk the trails at Red Rocks. Now, over time, there still is an association here. It's still the Queen City Park Association, so folks who live here still pay dues to that association, and now it's a thriving little community. It's beautiful here. Associating with Lake Champlain.
At this place in history.